Hey. So we're back. This is another episode about 1932 and the life of notorious Maine outlaw Lorin Roberts. My name is Jen, and you're listening to Outcasts and Dissidents, New England's History of Misbehavior, where we talk about true crime, real renegades, and rebellious countercultures of New England's past. So what off last time was that Lorin had, with an accomplice, escaped from the old Hancock County jail. They sawed through the 1.5-inch thick steel bars over their second-story window, stole a car, ended up in Cherryfield. Herbert, his accomplice, was captured in Bangor, but Lorin himself is still on the run. And so there's a lot to go. So first things first, maybe 2 months into him being on the lam, there's this, what they call the safe mystery, where the Maine Central Railroad office or Maine Central Freight office in Ellsworth was broken into, and apparently this 1.5-ton safe was taken to somewhere in Lemoyne or near Lemoyne and robbed of $15 cash. Seems like not very much for a 1.5-ton safe, but that's what he got out of it, or whoever got out of it. I don't even know. It doesn't seem like they ever figured out if it was actually Lorin or not, but the safe was stolen, and apparently there was a truck that and I think this is actually somebody that Lorin has stole a couple of cars from, but there was a truck there, and apparently that truck was taken, the safe was loaded up into it somehow, or dragged by it, or whatever, and taken off to a gravel pit. The safe was unloaded. The truck was taken back and put back into the garage. I don't know. They determined that the tire tracks on the site where the safe was found matched the treads on the truck. It was some Ford truck. I guess a Model T. I don't know. Very weird. So whether or not Lorin did that, no one knows. And it doesn't seem like he was ever charged with that. But anyhow, you don't really hear anything through the month of July, but then August happens. And so August 1st, actually, he ends up in Massachusetts. And so he was arrested on suspicion, or they attempted to arrest him on suspicion on the Mass Turnpike. And so right then and there, arresting someone on suspicion is very much like constitutional violation. You have to have better reason than suspicion to arrest someone. But they didn't even have him cuffed, and don't you know who you're messing with? And so he, according to one article, actually jumped off a 20-foot bridge and made his escape that way. And he ends up in Danvers when he's running through farms and gardens and the woods. Some farmer tried to stop him, and he threatened them with the shin bone of a cow. The cops who were following him were again doing this shoot on sight thing, which is just so egregious. But we think it's bad now. It was way worse. They literally would just shoot him, and they would shoot anybody who was black if they saw him and thought that it was him. So he also ends up crashing some party where they reported that this guy runs into the party, a black guy, and he looked like he had been wading waist deep in a swamp or whatever, and took money off of a mantle, and then runs out of the party and just takes off. And then he ends up also getting a car in Danvers, stealing a car, and he takes off and ends up back in Ellsworth. Now, the super messed up thing, and so he ditched the car outside of Ellsworth, but the super messed up thing was that there was also an assault on a woman, a rape, where, she was so the guy walks up to her, asked her for a glass of water. She's out there putting clothes on the line, and he asks her for a glass of water, and then he ends up like attacking her and quote unquote rendering her unconscious. And so she her son comes out, finds her unconscious. She's basically been raped half to death or whatever. And then I guess he goes off back to Ellsworth. Like the weird thing to me is, so why would he stop? Like, he's in this car, it's stolen, it's from Danvers. He makes it all the way to Ellsworth in it. So why would he stop just to ask for a glass of water and rape someone? I don't know. But that's what they say happened. Um anyway, so when he gets back to Ellsworth, I love this article in the Bangor Daily News. It says, it goes on to, it describes the car, Chrysler Coupe, hidden in the woods between the city and the Franklin Road. And Massachusetts registration plates, identified as stolen from Danvers, Mass. And it says, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson at once evolved the theory that Lorin Roberts, much wanted colored man, said to have been seen in the vicinity of Danvers, had decided to come touring back to his old haunts. About everything that's lawless around here is attributed to Lorin anyway. I think that's very self-aware of you, Bangor Daily News. I'm glad that you're recognizing that. At this point, they're aware that he's back, and he ends up being seen a few times, including at his quote-unquote trysting spot, where they say it's the driving park outside of town, which I came to realize refers to the racetrack at the fairground, which was not that far from where Lorin and Persis actually lived. So I have no idea how long it took me to figure that out. But yeah, so Lorin is seen all around like Waltham and these back roads, backwoods areas between like basically places that he would have had access to Washington County from. It's so interesting because he just goes back and forth all the time, and he moves mostly at night. It was pretty much like nocturnal. Pretty much anytime that he got caught, it was at night, or anytime he was seen, it was at night. Like, he was rarely around during the day. It's almost like he took that sundown thing and was like, up yours, white people, be out what I want. Yeah, so a couple of days later, I mean, he's stolen, like, and he's just up, like, stealing cars and all the time. It's just remarkable. And, you know, and then he'd wreck them, which is no surprise if you've ever been down, like, the Blackswoods Road or, like, any of these weird, like, rural mountain roads in Maine. But Blackswoods Roads is one of the craziest ones I've seen. Even now, it's, like, really thin, and, you know, the lanes are barely a lane, and they just go up and down these, like, super intense hills with all these curves, and there are giant granite blocks that line the road. There's one spot where, like, you take this really tight curve and it goes right along the edge of a pond where, I mean, especially in the winter, like, just be asking for it. It's no wonder he didn't mind staying in jail in the winter, because, dear God. Yeah, so he gets seen in Terryfield, he gets seen in Millbridge, he's seen back in Ellsworth, and then he's seen in Millbridge, and then he's seen in Ellsworth. And it's like, he's seen with Persis, and then he's, you know, driving by himself. And so they say, I mean, so this is only like 3 days into him being back in the Ellsworth area, and it says 3 cars are stolen within a 25-mile area. Foggates escape, which, welcome to Maine. It goes on to say that gunplay figured in the early morning search. And then, so a couple of officers were notified that he had been found and that he had stolen this car. And it's so funny because it seems like people didn't actually catch him stealing the cars. They just realized their car was gone. So I don't know what that's about. Because I mean, I guess the cars are kind of quiet, but I don't know. It's amazing to me. Anyway, but apparently this person actually realized that the car was stolen pretty quickly, and they were able to catch him, and more or less. So, yeah, he gets into this, like, high-speed pursuit, and he runs off into the woods, and the officers go after him. Well, they shoot at him, and he shot once at them, and then he ends up finding another vehicle to steal. He steals a truck, and it's loaded with produce. I actually think that there were maybe 2 cars parked in the garage, and then the truck was in the back. The 2 cars didn't have keys in them, but the truck did. And so he actually pushed the cars out of the garage and then started the truck and stole the truck loaded with produce. And yeah, this is, of course, like, he's already like jumped a fence, robbed into the woods, blah, 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 blah. And then manages to still push these two cars out, grab the truck, get out of town with it, and then get all the way back to Ellsworth, maybe like 2 or 3 blocks from his and Persis' house. The super messed up thing at the end of this article says, the state police under Lieutenant Colonel Wardwell of Bangor have been joined by sheriffs and other local officers in a determined hunt for the man, of course. Lieutenant Wardwell entertains the belief that Roberts, who has been arrested for similar offense and was awaiting the next term of the court when he escaped from the local jail, may be the assailant of Mrs. Harry D. Turner in Augusta. And that would have been at the time that he was driving across the state from Massachusetts. And it says that Wardwell states that when shown a picture of Roberts, Mrs. Turner said that she a noted resemblance to the man who attacked her and criminally assaulted her. Now, if that noted resemblance means black, we don't know, but she says that it was him. It's just the story is weird to me. And then I love the next day. This is August 10th, 1932. The headline says, "Searched woods but didn't find Lorin Roberts. Elusive and much wanted color man almost caught. Fired at officers. Steals a few more automobiles and vanishes." He did almost shoot the sheriff's deputy before stealing the truck. So this posse that is hunting him at this point is 35 highway officers and deputies searching the woods in the vicinity of Cherry Field. And it also cites that they searched both the house where that Persis lived in, and since he didn't seem to be there much, so but Persis lived there all the time. And then another house owned by none other than George Brooks, where Roberts was supposed to have been a frequent visitor, was also searched without result. So this is the weird thing to me, right? So at this point, he is accused of raping George Brooks's daughter, and yet this acknowledges that he's still friends with George. You know, I mean, like, it just isn't, like, how horrible of a person was George that he was still friends with Lorin, even though Lorin was raping his adolescent daughter? Like, I don't understand. Very weird. Don't forget about Eunice, by the way, because she comes up again soon. Citing this, just it proceeds to blow my mind that these records have kind of vanished, and that Hancock County themselves didn't even feel like it was worth keeping them around. But what this says is that Lieutenant Wardwell, which I believe was a state police guy, directing the manhunt, was the most extensive in the history of Hancock County, and it was declared that every effort would be made to apprehend the fugitive. Wardwell was confident that his arrest would be a matter of only a few days. So this is like the most extensive manhunt in the history of Hancock County, and yet can't even keep track of their records. I don't understand. Yeah, they're gone. No one knows what happened to them. And this is also around the time where we end up with the particular headline. It was one of the very first articles that I came across when I went, okay, that's language. Like, it says, it just, like, the headline itself, the, you know, caps headline says, "Much hunted Negro." And you're like, what? Like, that's not language that you should use if you're a decent person. And I understand that this is a time thing, and that, you know, using the term Negro was more acceptable than it is now. But it's putting hunted in front of that, like, that's dehumanizing language. And so it's not just like a racial thing, but it's, you know, I don't know. It got my attention. That and the ginormous headlines that come up in only a few days here. And then there's one last one that we'll get into before, like, the real nitty-gritty happens. But yeah, so we're building up to a climax here, as you can see. Like, he's stolen multiple cars. I mean, basically every day he's stealing cars, like, on average, a car a day. And he's all over, back and forth, like, never sitting still for very long, moving by night. running through the woods, all of like these crazy things. And then it gets into like these attempted thefts of cars, and it's like midnight car thieves. It talks about like somebody had tried to steal a car, couldn't steal the car, ended up siphoning gas out of it to steal the other car. And then the car was later found badly wrecked in a ditch near Cherryfield. Like I said, Blackswoods Road's like, it's treacherous. And I can only imagine what it was like when it was not paved. But yeah. So then it kind of goes quiet for 4 days. And then so this is August 15th, the night of August 15th, he is found on, it's called Beckwith Hill, and it used to be really rural up until, I don't know, maybe like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Even when I was a kid, it was pretty well undeveloped. And there was a dairy farm up there, and so he ends up at the dairy farm, and he's, I guess, drinking milk in the barn, like he climbed in through a window or whatever. And there was one guy, he was the game warden, who had an agreement with the guy who owned the farm that he could come at night and pick up his milk after hours. And so he shows up, I think it was like 9:30 one night or something, and he goes to pick up his milk, and he sees a light in the barn and looks in and identifies that it's Lorin. Lorin doesn't know this guy is there, so he goes to climb out the window and is like, startled by this game warden. And they end up getting into like a whole hand-to-hand thing, like a wrestling match. And the game warden said that he had blood on him and it must have been Lorin, so he must have gotten him good and whatever. But Lorin ended up getting away, running off, and then fired a couple of shots warning shots at him, like, don't chase me, dude. And so he just makes off and he's gone. And then the following night, and this is also around the same time that I think it was in Richmond or wherever, like they would pretty much do statewide manhunts for him. So at this point, they're like looking everywhere for this guy, trying to catch him. It's been, like they said, half a year or whatever that he's been on the lam. And so, and committing crimes readily. And so some civilian vigilante sees another black guy in a field picking blackberries and decided, oh, well, it's a black person, so it must be Lorin, and shot him. Fortunately, he only shot him through the leg, so he was okay, more or less. But yeah, that's one of those things where it goes to show you how, yeah, there weren't very many black people here, but those who were here were tremendously affected by the era that they lived in. In addition to this incident, the police in Brunswick were also, and I quote, arresting every Negro that wandered into town until they could prove that that wasn't Lorin, presumably by checking their body for the tattoos and bullet wounds that Lorin was known to have. So yeah. And just as a testament to how wild this entire thing has been, like, as I say that, I realize that in the bounty ad, whatever, that the sheriff put out, he said that Lorin had LER, which would be Lorin E. Roberts. Lorin Eugene Roberts was one of his tattoos. And then another one, the tattoo said MS. And I just realized that MS probably stood for Marion Steele, the girl that he was arrested with, that he had allegedly, like, kidnapped or whatever from Millbridge. So that's kind of wild, right? But anyway, yeah, so listen to this go. So yeah, August 16th, 1932 happens. And then the shit hits the fan. And he is in... Okay, so I guess he has a black friend, Wilfred Myrick, who lives in Millbridge. And Wilfred I'm gonna do some like genealogy or something. I'm like, is Wilfred like a cousin or something? Like, I don't know. But yeah, apparently he was friends with this guy Wilfred, and the police show up at Wilfred's house and they're like, hey, we got word that Lorin's on the way. And he's like, oh shit. And then little Howard Brooks shows up. And apparently Lorin had actually been seen in Ellsworth with Howard. And now why Howard showed up before Lorin, I don't really know. I don't know if they were in separate vehicles or what happened, but whatever happened, Howard showed up before Lorin. And the police pop up and they're like, hey, yeah, so we're here. And he's like, oh no, I don't know anything. And they end up getting it out. He's like, okay, fine, yeah, he's coming. And so then Lorin shows up, Howard opens the door, and the sheriff pops up. And he's like, Lorin goes, oh shit. And he goes to draw his gun and runs off. And so he shoots at the sheriff shoots at him, and he doesn't hit the sheriff, but the sheriff hits him twice. He gets shot through the stomach, blows out his back, and then he gets shot again, like kind of in his like hip, so like the bullet, I guess, grazed through his pelvis and took him down. And so he gets triaged there in Millbridge by a couple of doctors, and then he is brought back to Hancock County, where he escaped from, turned over to Hancock County Sheriff's Department. The Sheriff's Department assigns a deputy to babysit him in the jail, or in the hospital, Hurley Hospital in Ellsworth, which is now an apartment building. It looks nothing like a hospital, but that's where it was. The building still stands. And so he is there for quite a while, touch and go. They're worried he's not going to make it. They say that he's too weak to go to court and all of this stuff. And then literally like a day or two later, after the article saying that he's too weak to go to court, it's like, oh, but he escaped. And you're sorry, what? So it turns out that the hospital insisted that they had informed the sheriff's department that they needed to get him out. He'd had his surgery, the bullet had been removed, he was doing better, he needed to go and be somewhere more secure. The sheriff's department pleads ignorance. They're like, we had no idea about this. And so I guess what had happened was, it's like 1:30 in the morning, and Lorin managed to convince the sheriff's deputy, who was charged with keeping an eye on him, that his bedpan needed to be emptied. And so it's also worth noting that the hospital says that he had eaten rather ravenously for like days before this happened. So it's weird that they reported that he was weak, because obviously he was like, had plenty of an appetite and all that stuff, but whatever. Neither here nor there, because he was actually shackled to the bed, but apparently just in like the 2 minutes that the sheriff's deputy had gone to have the bedpan emptied, Lorin managed to slip the shackle, and it left blood on the sheets and everything. So they're like, it was physically impossible for him to do it, and yet he did it. And he grabbed the clothes that they had put in a drawer for him to wear to court and took off. One of the nurses says that she had heard a woman's voice say, "Are you okay, Lorin?" And so they think that Persis may have actually shown up and picked him up. But then the weird thing is that just like a block and a half down the road, he had gone to, I don't know if he knew that it was the county attorney's house, but it was the county attorney's house, and attempted to steal a vehicle. And that was also like behind the garage that he got dressed, because they found his tie and like a hanky or something laying on the ground. And so they know that he had gone down to this house. And so it seems weird that Persis would have picked him up and then dropped him off so close. I don't know. But the police also showed up at Persis's house, and she was dressed, and she says that she just went to bed in her clothes. But I would love to know what happened there, because they say that they had actually been allowed like private visitation. So they may very well have schemed. I don't know. And we don't know. No one knows. So then fast forward a few days, and Now shit gets really weird. Um, like my mind was actually blown when I read this next article. So, um, I mean, it's weird. It really makes you question things. So apparently he runs off to Ellsworth Falls Village, which isn't, it's not actually, I mean, it's kind of, so particularly back in the day, it's totally part of Ellsworth now, very clearly. But back in the day, you know, there would have been a bit more space, would have been more of a distance. So it's really part of Ellsworth, but it was like a major mill site along the river. And so it's called a separate village, but it's all part of Ellsworth. And so he ends up over there and he's at a boarding home. And now this is the boarding home where 12-year-old Eunice Brooks, George Brooks's daughter that Lorin is currently under indictment for having raped, is working. So she's working at a boarding home. It's also worth noting that the same week Lorin gets shot, that night Howard was arrested with him, and George Brooks was arrested for alcohol possession, because of course we're talking about prohibition here. So basically Cordelia, the mother, would have been on her own. Both of the men have been arrested. I don't know at what time Eunice went to work for this boarding home, but she was no longer with the mother. And both the guys were in jail. So she was harboring Lorin for they don't know how long. Days, anyway. We know it was days. And so I find some articles that say that it was the bedroom across the hall from Eunice's bedroom, but then I find other articles that say, and I don't know if this is to sensationalize, because like I said, I've said this over and over again, and by 1932 we're no longer talking about like an active KKK. We'll talk more about why the KKK was no longer this explosive thing like it was in the 20s in the actual KKK episode, but yeah, the Klan mentality and the Klan ethics were still very prevalent. The practices were there, minus like the weird esoteric, like cultiness of it, but it was still, the social impact was still there. So I don't know if they say that it was the same bedroom just to sensationalize the fact, like, oh, he's a creepy racist because, or racist, creepy rapist. And so this is why he's like sharing this bedroom with a 12-year-old girl. I'm kind of, because of course these are also the same papers that are reporting that he was shot in the head and not the hip. So whatever, like, I don't know. It's hard to say, you know, like we do consider newspapers to be a pretty solid source, but not always. They can fudge stuff or mess it up. So I don't know. It makes more sense to me if it was across the hall from Eunice's room. Just, I don't know. That sounds right-er to me. So regardless, the woman of the house walks into the bedroom one day while Eunice is at school and finds Lorin in the bedroom, and she's like, oh, I just imagine the screaming girl face from Birth of a Nation. And so she goes running out of the bedroom, running down the stairs, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna hurt you, it's fine, I'm sorry. And so she runs out of the house, gets the attention of her son who's next door. The son comes running over, sees Lorin, just goes running out of the house like he's not even about to play, and he realizes the jig is up and he's got to go. And he's like in his stocking feet and everything, and still of course has bullet wounds, mind you. But the son comes, tackles him. Lorin gets away, gets up, keeps running. The son grabs a gun and bird shot at him. So for people who don't know guns, bird shot, it's like one bullet that like turns into a bunch of little teeny tiny bullets. And so it wouldn't really hurt a human, especially like if there's any distance involved. Like, I mean, point blank, yeah, it's gonna hurt a lot. It's gonna fuck you up. But from this kind of distance that it was, Lorin fell, and so the guy thinks that he might have hit him, but it wouldn't have been enough to do any real damage. So Lorin gets up and he keeps running and he's off in the woods. And now, again, another posse is coordinated to hunt him, including there's a reference to dogs being deployed. They would put scent hounds out to try to catch him. And I was told by family that Lorin would actually keep pepper, like black pepper, on him to throw scent hounds off of his trail. And apparently it worked because they didn't find him. And he also went and stopped over at Persis' parents' house, and they also lived in Ellsworth Falls. Stopped at Persis' parents' house and got dinner, and probably took their black pepper, and then went off on his way. And he ends up being gone for weeks. And so this manhunt again kicks off this huge manhunt where they're involving armed civilians, like legit armed civilian posses. These are people like carrying rifles and shotguns and hunting him through the woods. They ended up putting up highway blocks all over the area. This manhunt actually cost like around $40-something thousand for the county. In today's money, it was $1,200 back then. And that's just for the county. That doesn't include the city of Ellsworth or the state of Maine or anybody else, or even like whatever the equivalent for volunteer hours was for these armed civilian volunteers, this vigilante posse. And it's really mind-blowing, but he was truly terrorized. Like, he was afraid at this point. You know, back, like, if you remember, there was an article from, I guess if you saw the YouTube version, or if you checked out Patreon, with the primary sources, there was a newspaper article when he escaped from the Wyndham Reformatory the first time in 1923, that the superintendent of the reformatory had asked him if he was afraid when he was arrested or when he was shot at, and he said no. Well, at this point, he was petrified, and he did not want to be caught. So he ended up hiding in the woods. And so it's October, and October is pretty much like almost winter in Maine. So you're talking frost, it's getting down into the 30s at night, and he is not dressed for the occasion whatsoever. And I guess there were actually times where he was like face to face with people in the dark and they didn't even know. I mean, he could have so easily been shot or so easily been arrested, or assaulted or whatever in the woods. And fortunately he wasn't. But there was a guy by the name of Chinny Higgins, and he also lived in the Ellsworth, Lemoyne area, but on the Buttermilk Road rather than Douglas Highway. And he ends up being arrested on, I think it was like October 12th, for allegedly helping Lorin out and like, you know, aiding and abetting a fugitive type thing. And then they let him out, and a couple of days later, Lorin turns himself in, and he actually, as it's reported, he, with the help of an intermediary who I believe to have been Chinny Higgins, although I can't technically prove that. I think Chinny was the guy helping him, just because the timing is weird and the location and all kinds adds up. So he, I guess, ended up turning himself in with terms and conditions. So Chinny helped to negotiate, you know, he wouldn't face any additional charges after his escape. He did a lot of things that he could have been charged for, and we never would have seen the light of day again. But just vehicle thefts alone, like a dozen of them. And then the sheriff would come, just one officer would come with Persis to a designated location at a designated time. He would honk the horn, and then Lorin would come out. And that's exactly what happened. And they said that he was like emaciated and freezing and having a difficult time walking because he still has bullet wounds that haven't healed properly because of the cold. And so, oh, he's so grateful to be in jail. Like, yeah, kind of, sort of. Um, but yeah, so and he does end up going to prison, but not for very long. He only went for a couple of years, and he could have gone for, God, so long. Um, they didn't end up charging him in the Augusta incident with the woman. Uh, they just they let everything go. And I mean, after that, he doesn't get charged with any of this crazy shit anymore. He We'll get into, his later story and stuff, but since we're already past 30 minutes here. But um yeah, it's like everything just changes after this. Like, it was kind of like, you're not gonna fuck with me anymore, we're done. And so yeah, everything just totally changes after this. So yeah, we'll come back and do another episode, kind of a recap and all that stuff next time. So make sure that you do join on Patreon so that you can get access to some of these primary sources that I've collected along the way. And of course, early releases and bonus material and all of that good stuff. And make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, share, all of those good things to help support me be able to do this research and make this material for you guys. Yeah, thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to next time. And until then, I'll be wishing you fair winds, following seas, and a little bit more equity, and maybe some social justice too.